Jazzcast Pros.
Hello, my graceful grinders. It's your girl, Dr. Pamala Brown-Grinion, here for another wonderful episode of the Grace and Grind podcast. And as usual, I have another fantastic, I should say fabulous guest for you on today. Her name is Maryann Rivera Dannert. And Maryann has a podcast called Fearless Fridays with Maryann. And it's all about helping the listener to heal and nurture their inner child. I'm so excited to be speaking to Maryann today. We are going to be specifically talking about being victims of child sexual assault. I also want to tell you that Maryann is the CEO of MRD Empowerment Solutions, which is a training and coaching services institution. And she also has a magazine for women called Fabulousness Unleashed. I just love the title of the magazine. And if that is not enough, she is also the co-author of 16, and yes, I said 16 books. So let's welcome Miss Maryann onto the Grace and Grind podcast. Maryann, how are you doing today, girl?
I am doing fabulous, and thank you so much for having me on your show. It's an honor.
Welcome to Grace and Grind, the podcast redefining what it means to act like a lady, but think like a boss. All while helping female professionals navigate the intricacies of the workplace with poise, confidence, and grace. I am so excited to talk to you. When I was telling Jazz that I wanted to have a real conversation about sexual abuse and how it truly impacts us as women. And the younger it happens, the more detrimental it seems to be, the symptoms of it, the symptomology of it, and what it does and how it impacts our lives. And I can speak personally, as a survivor. So we'll just have us some great dialogue. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. Wonderful. Can you share a bit about your journey from the time of your sexual abuse to where you are now, and also what has helped you in finding healing and strength? What has helped you most?
Thinking back, actually, after numerous years, I realized that it happened. I was under the age of 6 or 7. Can't recall the exact age, but I know that I was small. And I recall that I was living in Puerto Rico. And the reason that I say I recall is because, as unfortunately many individuals that are victims of sexual abuse, you block it out. And it wasn't until I was in the juvenile delinquent system in the detention center under the care of a psychiatrist that this information surfaced. And individuals might be thinking what, how does that happen? So a little of the backstory, I was living in Puerto Rico. The situation happened. And as often, individuals, the predators will say, you can't tell anyone. This is our secret. If you tell anyone, you're going to get in trouble. There's a lot of threats that are going on. People are not going to believe you and things like that. I honestly don't recall if it happened multiple times, if it was a one-time event. All I know is that it was one time too many to the point that it affected me. I was very promiscuous as a teenager. I did not know how to say no because I figured when I tried to say no, things still happened. So what was the point? And, watching TV, movies and things like that, you see certain things that happen when you try to fight and to say no and things like that. So it was like, what's the point? So I was very promiscuous. In addition to being very promiscuous and, fear of saying no, I was also a people pleaser I was searching for love, searching for belonging, for acceptance, because I feel that that was something that was missing for me growing up, which led to me making the decisions that I have made earlier in my life and in my teenage years that led down the road of, again, being promiscuous, dropping out of school at the age of 16, having very toxic and unhealthy relationships, being a victim of domestic violence. And the thing about it is that even though it could have been a one-time event. Again, I don't recall how many times it might have happened, but it was enough to just crush my soul because again, I didn't trust people. I felt like I couldn't talk to anyone about it because those threats were there in the back of my mind. When I finally made the realization that something had occurred when I was, in juvie, it was kind of like, wow, that explained a lot, but it was still kind of like there were things that were going on that I recall talking to my mom about it and the way that, she acted, whether it was something on TV or something like that. I just felt like I couldn't say anything because again, I wouldn't be believed. I wouldn't have had the reaction that I was hoping to get. So I still didn't say anything. The first time I actually told another individual about it, aside from the therapist, was my first husband. I, just didn't feel like being intimate. And I remember him saying to me, you didn't say no to somebody else and they did what they did and you're saying no to me. And it was kind of like, first of all, I was a child. Second of all, it's my body. I now have the power to say no. And just because we're husband and wife does not mean that the answer is yes. It's still my body and I can still say no. And I just remember that, wall that I had tried over the years to knock down, those bricks that I was trying to bring down. I immediately just remember just being back up. And not only was that wall back up filled with bricks, it was made of steel. So it was going to be impenetrable. No, I was not going to talk about it. And I didn't until numerous years later, where I finally opened up to an ex-boyfriend. We talked about it. And in my conversations with him, he was very understanding. And he was like, wow, I'm sorry that happened to you. And I was like, why are you apologizing? It wasn't you. And he was like, because no one should have to go through that. Doesn't matter the age. It doesn't matter the sex because men are also abused. No one should have to go through that. And I'm sorry that you have held on to that for all of these years. And I'm getting goosebumps. And I think just having the freedom, the respect and understanding from another individual allowed me to just more openly talk about it. Baby steps, very slowly. He introduced me to some individuals that, again, allowed me to talk about it, ask questions, but it was a very safe space. And they will ask me questions like, what would you do differently, if anything? What would you tell your younger self? What would you tell your teenage self? And things like that. And it was gradually, through healing, seeing therapies, therapists, affirmations that have slowly allowed me to start moving forward and to heal. And that's one of the reasons why I'm able to talk about it so openly now, because I do feel that I am at a point that I have healed from that and why I do what I do.
I'm so glad that you explained it in the detail in which you did, because I know that I encounter a lot of women who just a couple of weeks ago, I did a keynote address at a college and I said that, I had this experience and it wasn't a part of my speech. I didn't intend for it to be a part of the speech. It was just like, say it. And I questioned, should I say it? Then I'm thinking, you always preach to people that you can't heal what you conceal, or other people can't become healed if you concealed, because I know that I'm in a healed place. So I said it. And I had two women come up to me afterwards and say, well, one of the women said, I've never told anyone. I'm 56 years old. I've never told anyone until this moment.
That's powerful.
Yes. And another woman said, thank you for saying that, because you are giving me the courage. Because she said she just wasn't able to admit to herself that it happened. And I just asked a question to the audience, and I just said, do I look like I've been sexually abused? And I was making a point that you don't have to look like what you've been through.
Correct.
And I said, do I look like I've been sexually abused? And I list a few other things. And no. I said, and you don't have to either. Right. Your dash can look very differently, but you do have to do some things. Right. So I'm glad that you talked about the different emotions that you felt and the type of behaviors that this one experience caused you to have in your life. Some of it self-destructive behavior. And you talked about, being in the juvenile detention center, and people don't really think about their past trauma impacting them in their future and adult lives, or, teenage, young adult into adult lives. And I can relate to all of that. Yeah. I can relate to just feeling like just not having the self-esteem and the self-worth that I should have had for myself. And I allowed a lot of things to happen to my body that I should not have allowed, because I felt like that's what I was deserving of. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I didn't give myself the care that I should have. And it's all stemmed from those experiences.
Correct.
Yeah. So thank you so much for just giving it the care and the detail that you did, because I know someone else is saying, I thought I was the only one.
And I think that that's one of the reasons why I am so open about it now, why I talk about it.
Me too.
Yes, because it could just be one person. It could just be one person. And I just want that one person to know it was not your fault. It doesn't matter how old you were. It doesn't matter where you were. If you were someone who was, a teenager or a little older, it does not matter what you were wearing, because sometimes, you must have wanted it because your skirt was too short, your pants were too tight, or anything like that. It was not your fault. You are not at fault. And there is help out there. There are people that will create and have a safe space for you to talk about it, to heal, and just reach out. Just reach out.
Yes. And to piggyback off of that, Maryann, I would also say start early.
Yes.
Like somehow, some way, you have to find the courage to jump off the ledge sooner rather than later. Because the longer you keep that in you and inside of you, the more corrupt it becomes. It just does so much damage emotionally, spiritually, physically, physiologically. I mean, so many,
it's endless.
Yes, it goes on and on. And the sooner you can reach out for services, and it does, and the reason, that's why I said courage, because it does take courage, and you do have to forget about all the things your perpetrator said that frightened you or made you feel like if you say something, someone else will get hurt, or you will get hurt, or you'll get in trouble, or forget all of that.
Correct. And if you have had the courage in the past, as I did, to speak up and say something, and that person did not react the way you expected them, it kind of feels like you were like you were abused all over again. But just stick to that courage. Remind the little you that you are now safe. You are now protected. You might not have had the courage, the strength, or even the wisdom to do anything about it in your earlier years, but you do now. And it is now your responsibility to heal your inner child.
Right. You're right. And you're right. Even though you weren't the person that hurt yourself, it is your responsibility to make sure that you are healed.
Yes.
And you can, right? That's the message, that you can.
Yes, you definitely can.
And no one can make you do it except you.
Right. Yeah.
You can go to all the therapy in the world get all the coaching you want to get, but if you don't open up and speak those words out of your own mouth, you're kind of keeping that python wrapped around your soul.
Yeah. And you can even have a conversation with the younger you. You can write a letter to the younger you. You can read it out loud. Pretend you're talking to her. Get to her eye level. And at the end, just free yourself. Forgive her, because deep down inside, we always tend to blame ourselves and hold ourselves hostage because of that. Forgive yourself. Burn the letter. No one else has to read the letter. That's between you and your inner child in the future you, because the future you still also needs to be relieved and set free from that trauma.
Mm-hmm. And I know when you're trying to free yourself from the trauma, you have moments when you feel overwhelmed because you can't free yourself without revisiting.
Correct.
You have to revisit and go back. So can you share what types of tools or practices that you use to help yourself find a sense of control or peace while you were, trying to get through this healing process? Because it is a very tough process.
It is. It is very tough, and it's not going to happen overnight. Mm-hmm. And you might have to try several different things, because to me, it was a combination of different resources, different tools that have helped me over the years. And some of those things I still continue on, as journaling. Mm-hmm. I am very big on writing letters to my younger self and to my future self. Talking to someone, whether it's a trusted individual, whether it's a therapist. Also meditation. There's some, tools. I love an app. It's called Insight Timer. And there's a couple of them in there that talk about healing the inner child. And I remember one time I fell asleep listening to one, and I woke myself up because I was crying, because all they kept on saying was, I love you. I love you. I love you. So you're telling little you, I love you. And sometimes it's just those 3 little words that are very hard to say to ourselves, but it's the 3 little words that we most desire to hear, and it's very needed. So I was saying, meditate, prayer, journal, and write letters to your future and to your younger self, and also talk to someone.
Yes, I did all of those same things. I didn't write the letters to my younger self, but I definitely practiced in meditation and the journaling. And I did see a therapist, for many different therapists, because I tried it multiple times and I just couldn't seem to take myself deep enough into the basement, but each time I got closer, but and I like what you said about you. It doesn't take over. It's not going to be a quick process. You didn't get that way overnight. You are not going to change overnight. So extend yourself some grace and just trust the process. And don't beat yourself up when you stop, even if you stop for years, because that does happen. It's not a continuous cycle sometimes for some people. Sometimes you stop and then you think about it, because you get sick and tired of being sick and tired of it robbing you of more of your life. And then you say, okay, I'm going to start again. And then you start, and I'm not going to quit this time. And then you quit. Right. And then you beat yourself up because you quit. Right. And then you wait another few years, and, before you know it, you've spent 10, 15 years stopping and going and prolonging the healing, process. But it's okay. What matters is that you don't stop starting over. If you got to restart, just keep restarting.
And also ask yourself, when you do stop, what is it about the process that you are afraid to move forward?
That's good.
Ask yourself, what is it about this journey that I'm afraid to move forward? What is it that I'm afraid to admit? Because there is something there. And until you're able to acknowledge it and you're able to accept it, you're not going to be able to move forward and heal.
That is true. What I ask my coaching clients is, what's the worst that's going to happen? Because people say, I'm scared. I'm scared. And I can relate to I'm scared. I can relate because I just told you how many times I just couldn't get down into the basement. It's like I get there and I was like, oh, I'm not taking that last step. I don't want to, no, I don't want to go out. Right. But what's the worst that's going to happen if you do? You're going to cry. Maybe. You might get mad. You might want to punch somebody. But really, and if the worst that is going to happen, you're not going to drop dead if it happens. You just process that. I know I'm making it sound easier than it is, but really, you were so afraid. What are we afraid of? To cry about it, to think about it. So don't be afraid. My Nana used to say, your healing is on the other side of your tears. And she used to also say, so when you're crying, cry with a purpose. Because I used to, I don't know, I just used to cry, and she would say, girl, what you crying for? What you crying? And I would say, oh no, I just feel like crying. And she would like, you just feel like crying? Come here. And I would go over to her and she would say, no. We're not just going to be crying just to be crying. Okay. I want you to think about something that you're crying for so that you could be better when you're done crying. She said it in her broken English and her grandma wisdom and, those wise soliloquies and in her own words. But in essence, what she was saying was, think about something that has hurt you or that you really need to be released from, and intentionally cry. Don't just be wasting tears crying just to be crying. Like, cry with a purpose. And, I didn't really realize until some years into my life, when you reflect back on what the old folk, have said. And it was like, wow, I get that now. Like, cry with what you crying for? Like, cry with a purpose. Yeah. So now for me, Maryann, in my process, I had some very tumultuous relationships with myself, with others, with the opposite sex, with God. Like that, those instances of being sexually abused, like, really manifested in relationships for me. What about you? How are your relationships with yourself, with others, with men, and with God?
So today we are healed and the relationships are wonderful. But back then, So when it came to God, I was raised in a legalistic household. So it was God for breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, from sun up to sundown and in between. And it was like, why would you let this happen to me? Where were you?
That why question.
Yes. It's like, where were you? And it actually wasn't until I wrote, I forgot when it was, one of the anthologies that I wrote that is called Surviving Her from Pain to Purpose, something like that. And it was about overcoming traumas that we've experienced, sexual traumas. And my biological father that I was not raised with, he doesn't read English, but his wife does. And she buys my books. And I was like, I can't publish this book until I talk to my dad and tell him what I'm going to write about. And I remember when I wrote the chapter and when the visionary talked about the release date, and I was like, oh, wait, I got to talk to my dad. And I wanted to go to Puerto Rico and talk to him in person because this is not a conversation that you have over the phone. It was some hurricane that was happening in Puerto Rico and I could not go to Puerto Rico. So I called him and he was like, how are you? What's going on? And I told him and he was like, I have to call you back. And he hung up the phone. I was like, okay, what just happened here? He called me back like 2 hours later and he was crying on the phone. That's why he hung up. Because immediately it was like just taking a glass and just dropping it. His world just shattered. I am his only daughter. And it was immediate. Where was I? Why didn't you tell me? I am so sorry this happened to you. Why did you wait so long? And more questions. And I, talked to him and things like that. And I think it healed our relationship. I didn't really know that it was kind of like broken or bruised or anything like that. But I feel that it did bring us closer. So the relationship with him definitely changed. The relationship with God, it changed because my dad said to me, because my dad is a pastor. So I did ask him, like, where was God through all of this? And he said, you have to remember that we are in the world, but there is someone greater in the world who is just roaming around, and he gives us free will, and God is not going to take away anyone's free will.
Right.
People have a choice.
Right.
And it was kind of like, okay. And he asked me, he was like, have you forgiven the individual? No. That was my attitude back then. And I want to say this was probably because I was living in Florida when the book came out. So I want to say it was probably about 7 years ago. And I was like, no, what do you mean forgive? What? For what? No. And he was like, you are blaming and holding on to that guilt. That individual is not thinking about you. As a matter of fact, I confided in my dad who the individual was. He's the only person that knows. And that person is no longer alive. He was like, that man is dead. He was like, you just have to forgive.
Mm-hmm. For you.
Yes. Forgiveness for myself. Yes. For myself. Not the individual. Not forgiving what he did.
Right.
But forgiving for myself.
Right. So you can move on.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes. And that part took a very long time. Because
but it was freeing, right?
It was very freeing. And sometimes when we think about forgiveness, we think that we're letting the person off the hook.
Right.
But forgiveness is for yourself. It's not for the other person. It's for yourself. So my relationship with my dad improved. My relationship with God improved. My relationship with my husband improved because we were a bit more able to freely talk about it and things like that. Not the ex-husband, because we ended up getting divorced. This is my new husband. And so
you're not your husband.
Correct.
Your new husband.
Yes.
Right.
But growing up, my relationships with, the opposite sex, because again, like I said, as a teenager, I was very promiscuous because I was afraid to say no. Mm-hmm. As I got older, obviously we don't know things in the moment. It's like when we're doing that reflection, we're looking back, I realized that I was very attached to people. So like I immediately clinged on to people because I was afraid of them leaving me. So it was a combination of the sexual abuse. It was a combination of feeling abandonment and neglect from my parents. Because when my biological parents got divorced, my dad left. So it was like, well, where is he going? And then when my mom met my stepfather, they moved away for, I think it was probably like 6 months. And I was with my grandmother. They went to work in the farms from Puerto Rico to Florida. But as a child, you don't know why your parents leave. You just know they're not here.
They're not there.
So first it was my dad, and then now my mom and my stepdad, my parents. What am I doing wrong? Like, what is wrong with me? So whenever I got into a relationship, I ignored every sort of flag that was being thrown at me because I did not want to lose that individual. Mm-hmm. And I also had a lot of fear of being by myself. Mm-hmm. So that was, and again, all of that was, I've healed through that with a combination of, again, the meditation, the journaling, praying, talking to people, and I think for me also, the things that I do now are also a form of healing for myself.
Yes, very cathartic. What I want to say is, because I know some people will listen and say, why are they on there telling all their business? Why are they talking about the past? Why are they rehashing? If they're over it, let's be over it. Honey, we're getting healed even more. Okay, yes. That's why. And we're helping other women to be healed. And men, if you happen to be listening, somebody is relating to this. Somebody understands. Somebody is feeling like this. Somebody is going through this right now. Somebody is on their healing journey and feeling stuck and not knowing how to get free from it. And so if you are listening, we are telling you as overcomers, that you can also be free, but you have to take the reins of your life back. And there are things that you have to do in order for you to be free from sexual trauma. And if God did it for me and Maryann, God will do it for you. But you have to put some work in. And don't worry about people saying to you, why are you talking about it? Why are you talking about it? Because that's how you get better, by talking about it, by admitting it to yourself first, and by being able to release it. Every time you talk about it, you're going to feel better. So ignore the critics and get your freedom.
Yes. And also, sometimes we go through things so our stories are not for us.
Exactly.
Our stories are to help others heal. And I will also add to that it does not mean that when you are healing, that you have to be open about it. Your healing is between you and whatever method you decide to go, whether it's therapy, whether it's talking to God, talking to a pastor, talking to your best friend, talking to your journal, whatever healing path you want to take, that's between you and the healing path. For me, I feel that I have been called to share my story openly with others to help them heal. And whether it's one person or whether it's 1,000 people that heal, I feel that it's my calling. And that's why I do what I do.
Me too, Maryann. Yeah. And kudos to us for answering the call.
Yes.
Right. And I believe that too, that, because I used to ask the why question all the time. Like, why me? Why does this keep happening to me? I used to just hate being a cute girl. I hated it. I thought it was a curse until I began to learn how to use it to my best advantage. See, you were promiscuous, and I had to flip it around in my brain and tell myself, I got to get him before he get me. Mm. So you're not, don't think you're doing something to me. I'm doing it to you first. Right. You're not doing anything to me. I'm doing it to you. And it was just the way I processed it to help me, get through it. I'm going to get you before you get me.
Right. Yeah. And something very powerful that you also said is like, if somebody is questioning, why are we talking about it? My question would be, why aren't you?
Right.
Because that is, I think, a major problem in the Black and brown community, that things occur in our homes, in our households, and we sweep it under the rug. It stays within our four walls, and it just keeps occurring generation after generation.
Curses.
Yes. Generation after generation after generation. And we wonder why it's like broken people are with broken people, creating broken families and breaking households. And it just continues on. So it's like, just because something happened does not mean that you have to stay quiet. Mm-hmm. Open up. There's help out there. So speak about it and set yourself free.
Yeah, because when we do that, we silence the future victims. Correct. And the current victims.
Yes.
We're robbing them of their voice, and we haven't created a safe space or an atmosphere for someone to come to us and say, hey, I've been sexually abused. So that's one of the reasons why when I'm training and if it comes up, it comes out. It must be this. God must have somebody in this room that needs to hear about it. And so speak it. And if it falls off my lip, it falls off my lips unapologetically. And every single time somebody comes up to me and says, oh my God, thank you for saying that. Oh my God. Oh my God. And, people will try to tell you how to heal. And sometimes people, if they've had the experience, I've experienced this personally. I know people that have had the sexual abuse experience, and because they aren't ready, they try to shun me away from getting healed from it. And I'm like, no, I'm talking about it. Why you keep talking about it? Why you keep telling people? I'm talking about it.
Right.
I'm talking about it. And I don't have to say who and when and all that.
Correct.
Because people know who they are, right?
Right.
All they need to know is, I forgive you.
Yeah.
That's all I got. That's all I got for you. I forgive you. Now, does that mean I have to share a space? Absolutely not.
Nope.
But I forgive you nonetheless. When I was a child, I had no control over the shared space.
Right.
But now as an adult, Oh,
Right.
I choose.
Yeah.
Because I can.
Correct.
I choose because it's protection for me. Right.
Yes.
And so it's okay. I handle it politely. I have handled it politely and respectfully.
Yeah.
Right. But it's clear.
Yeah.
But no, just because I have my hand up and saying that's no more, please hear me when I say I have forgiven, 100% forgiven, but I choose not to share. And I had someone question me and say, well, if you're so healed, why can't you share a space? My answer was because I don't want to.
Correct.
No confirmation, no denial. I just simply don't want to. And at 58 years old, you damn well better believe that I get to choose who I share my space with.
Correct.
Right? What do you think people need to understand about healing from the sexual abuse process before we wrap up?
I want to say again, it's going to take time. That healing looks very different for everyone. For the individual who is going through, the process, be gentle with yourself. Be gentle with yourself. There are going to be days that if you're journaling, for example, you just free write and the words would just come out. If you're talking to, whether it's a therapist or your best friend, whomever you're talking to, and the words may just flow out and you will be okay. But there might be days that you're stuck. Nothing comes out of your mouth. Nothing is right, being written. Be gentle with yourself. It is okay. Your healing does not have to look like anyone else's healing. It's your process. It's your journey. Whatever works for you, just make sure that you stick through it. And I also want to say, especially for individuals who have children, be mindful of who you allow to be around your children, whether it's significant others, whether
Trust
it's
no
family members, correct. And if your child all of a sudden does not want to be around someone, respect them. Don't say, well, that's your uncle, that's your cousin, that's whoever. Go give them a hug. If your child says no, respect that. It's their body. The kids have a sixth sense. They're able to feel things. So listen to them. Don't nag them about why you're acting that way and things like that. Just, okay, they said no, respect them. So just be mindful of that also.
Right, because a sexual predator does not look like the boogeyman.
Correct.
A sexual predator can be the finest man, a wealthy man.
Or woman.
Or woman. Correct. Someone with a great job, a relative. There is no specific physical characteristic or
traits
or demarcation, right? Or trait. A predator can be anyone.
Yeah.
So, Maryann, you have a podcast, Fearless Fridays with Maryann. You have a coaching and training business, MRD Empowerment Solutions, where you're empowering women to go after their healing and become the best versions of themselves. You have a magazine that further encourages and gives women information about how to unleash their fabulosity. And you've co-authored 16 books.
Yes.
I would say that is a grind if I ever heard one.
In addition to having a 9-to-5, but we'll talk about that another time.
At 9-to-5, you got children?
I do. They're all adults.
They still need parenting from time to time, right? And this was a journey. This didn't happen overnight. This was a journey. Like, how did you come out on top? Because that grind, how do you look like you look, be how you are, do what you do, and look so graceful while grinding through healing and figuring out, I want to do a podcast, I want to do a magazine, I want to co-author books, I want to do this, how did you make that grind through that process so graceful and elegant and beautiful? How did you do that?
I love this question. It is so awesome. I would have to say because my why is bigger than me. Everything that I do is, and it's the mission and vision of my business, MRD Empowerment Solutions, is to equip women with strategies to build healthy boundaries, shift their mindset so they can fearlessly live and create the life of their dreams. And my vision is to see women worldwide live a free, fearless, and fabulous life. And I do everything because I am becoming the role model that I needed in my formative years.
Yes.
I needed someone that I could turn to that will have a safe space for me. And I did not have that. I don't think a lot of individuals have that. And I am becoming that person. I am becoming that safe space where someone can just, whether it's through emailing me, texting me, or messaging me on social media and just, or, commenting on the podcast, just saying thank you for allowing me to be me, showing up as me. This X, Y, and Z has occurred. And because of you or because of your guest on your show, I am able to talk about it and start that healing process.
Wonderful, 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 wonderful. Maryann, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your journey and your heroic story. Like, that was just amazing. So raw and real and authentic and vulnerable and expressive. And thank you. Just thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Likewise.
you. I really appreciate you being here and sharing with us so authentically. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. And I want the audience to remember that you are a priority and you matter.
Amen. Well, that's all we have time for today, my graceful grinders. Thank you so much for joining me on the Grace and Grind podcast. Remember to like, share, tell someone about it, leave a comment. I want to hear from you. And remember to always, always, always create your totally unique day on purpose.